So welcome to Blueprint Pure and Health Bars. In this video, we will be using Blueprint Pure in C++ and giving ourselves a nice read-only function and also setting up these little blue health bars above our tank so we know what state we're in. So see you in there. Okay, so to get these health bars going, let's start off by going into the tank blueprint. We're going to need a new component on the tank blueprint. So we want a widget component. Now they're saying that that's an experimental component recently added, but you should be fine. So just add a widget to the tank. And for now, we'll just call it widget actually, rather than calling it health bar, just to keep things separate, because this is a component of the tank and it is a widget, but we are actually going to want to make a widget class for it, a health bar widget class. So it's a component inside a component, if you like. The widget is a component of the tank, and then the health bar that we're going to make will be a blueprint that we will specify in here in this widget class. Okay, so we have the widget on the tank. That's not going to do anything right now. If we play the game, it'll just does nothing. But we have it available at least. Now let's go and make ourselves a new blueprint. I'm going to put it in the UI folder, and I'm going to make a new blueprint of type widget blueprint here under the user interface section. So there you go. I'm going to call it health bar. And then we have the starting point for our health bar. Let's go into that health bar. Now it's actually going to be a very simple piece of UI. If you look, you've got something here called a progress bar. Let's drop that progress bar onto the canvas panel. So I'm dragging from common progress bar, dropping on the canvas panel, and that puts me a progress bar component. Now remember, I said whenever you drop UI components down, the first thing you want to think about is your anchors. And in this case, we want the progress bar to actually fill the canvas altogether. You'll see how that pans out in a moment. So we pull the anchor point, the bottom right anchor point, down to 100% like this. And that way, this offset that you see under the anchors in the detail tab is relative to the bottom right anchor point. So you'll see that if I grab the actual bar, you see those numbers getting smaller. So that tells us pretty much straight away that if we want to fill up the entire canvas with the progress bar so that our entire UI is just a progress bar, then we put a 0, 0 offset for right and bottom, and there you go. The canvas is now full of health bar. Now we'll worry about sizing and scaling it elsewhere, but that is pretty much it as far as a health bar is concerned, apart from, if you look down, we're going to need to bind this %. We can do that now, and what that's going to do is it's going to give us under the graph of the health bar, it's going to give us a get %. It's calling it _0. I'm going to use F2 to just take off the _0. It's got a get % function. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a blueprint pure, as it happens, type of function that is going to get us our health %. But in order to do that, we're going to need to be able to reference the tank. We're a little bit away from the tank right now. If you think about where we are, the tank has a widget on it. The widget is of widget class health bar. Now we can choose that, by the way, now back in the component of the tank. You can specify this health bar, and then if we browse with the magnifying glass, this is the health bar that we've created. So we're 2 levels of indirection away from the tank itself, and we need to find a way of actually finding the tank and writing a method on it that we can access here. So let's think about that. The first thing is that we go back to the tank. The tank itself is going to need to expose its health %. So what I'm going to do on the tank is I'm going to take the constructor and pop it into the private section just because I want to keep the public interface tidy. I'm then going to make myself a float get health %. Percentage or %, let's just say %. It doesn't actually need to take any parameters, and it's going to return a percentage health. And it's going to return a percentage health between 0 and 1. So we could say that returns health, current health, as a percentage of starting health between 0 and 1. Okay, so let's make this thing a U function. And I'm going to introduce you to a new annotation. Now I'll link this in the notes for you, but there is something called a blueprint pure. And blueprint pure is a bit like the blueprint equivalent of const in C++. It does not affect the owning object in any way and can be executed in a blueprint or level blueprint graph. In fact, we don't even need to worry about the execution flow nodes with blueprint pure, as you'll see, because it's not mutating or changing anything. So blueprint pure allows us to make this read-only pure function that we can be sure doesn't change anything. The category, I'm just going to say equals health. All right, so it's pretty simple. We've got this float get health percent, and in fact, it should be const as well, because we don't want get health percent to be mutating any of the properties. So let's go and implement get health percent. I'm going to do the quick thing with Visual Studio. Well, I say quick, let's see if it's any quicker. I think it is a tiny bit quicker. And here it is. Now, what are we going to return in get health percent? Well, we've got two values. We have a current health and a starting health. I just want to return the percentage of current health over starting health. One way to do that with these floating points is like this. We can cast the current health to a float like that, and then we can, while we're doing the division, also cast the starting health to a float. So we're doing floating point division here, ensuring that we are returning a floating point because we've got a float over a float. Remember that the current and the starting health aren't floats, they are int32s. So these pretty sensibly get converted from a whole number into a floating point number. Then we do a floating point calculation and return the value. So that is the get health percent method. Let's just compile up and make sure that that is all at least compiling. And we could, if we wanted to, on the tank, test that get health percent by going to the event graph, going and finding the tick method. And then as soon as the compilation is finished, we should have the ability to get health percent, but it won't be there until we've compiled. So what we need to do is just grab a reference to ourself, to the tank. From the tank reference, we should have the option for a get health percent. And what we can do every tick, and you see how this get health percent doesn't have execution nodes. You see it does not have the white nodes because it can't change anything. It doesn't matter when this happens, which is quite handy. That's a good sign. The more of that we can have in Blueprint, the better. It is the execution flow that goes alongside the data flow, so the execution flow being the white stuff that makes things confusing. So then we're just going to need to turn this into a string. And it seems to be doing that straight for us. So we wire up every tick. We're going to print the health percent of the tank. Let's just make sure that that works. So we're getting hello, hello, hello rather than a health percent, and that's because I've wired it to the duration and I never compiled. So let's just convert this float into a string and wire it in there. Okay, it's more sensible. Compile that, play it. Now we're getting 1.0, 1.0. So that's the two tanks, me and the enemy tank, both have a health of 1.0 at the top left of the viewport. You see my health has now gone down to 0.8 and 0.6 and so on. So that's working. That's brilliant. I'm going to get rid of this test code now that we know that that works. And that is just a simple way of testing what you've done in Blueprint. Okay, fine. So now the question comes, how do we get the reference to the tank from the health bar? Well, what we're going to need to do over in the tank is we're going to need to do a very similar initialize to what we did before. So starting with this widget component, what I want you to do is to work out how to come off this, get the user widget. So I'll help you a little bit, get the user widget object. You may have to cast or change the type. And then I want you to make a setter, a Blueprint setter, that is going to set a variable that you'll specify over here on the health bar. So you're going to need to make yourself a variable of type tank over here on the health bar so that we can get a tank reference. We'll be able to drag it in from here, make a variable of type tank, and then set that variable from here. If we come off here, we should be able to set the variable, wire up the execution as appropriate, and then we'll tidy this up a little bit later. I know it's going to be messy, but let's just see if you can do that. Okay, wonderful. So let's get this going. Over on the health bar, we're going to need a variable for the tank. So I'm simply going to call it tank or owning tank. I'll call it my tank, I think, because it's the tank that is relevant to this particular health bar. What type is it? Well, it's of type tank. So let's search that for that. There you go. Tank. Okay, great. So now we have this my tank reference here. We can get it from my tank. If this was set, we'd be able to get the health percent, like so, and then we can simply, all this health bar does is that. It just goes, okay, find my tank and return me the health percent and set the UI accordingly, and then we'll worry about spacing and setting up the UI. But in the tank, the challenge that you had to do, of course, was to go and find that. So how are we going to do it? Well, we get the user widget object like that, but we need to cast this to a health bar, because at the moment it is just a generic widget object. Now it's a health bar. Let's bring the execution flow in. And if the cast succeeds, then from this we can set tank, set my tank. Yeah, because that's the variable we just set over in the health bar, and the health bar has a MyTank variable. And at this node, we're in the context of the health bar. So this is how we go from the tank to the health bar. The health bar finds out about its tank. Now, I don't like this because it's a different level of abstraction to these other things. This is saying initialize tank aiming, initialize tank movement component, and then suddenly we're initializing the health bar widget. Well, because that's what we're doing, why don't we highlight all these nodes, right-click and say collapse to function. You can do exactly the same in Blueprint as you would in C++. So there you go. That's now collapsed down. All we need to do is go and find it and rename it to initialize health bar widget. Okay, now that's much clearer, and we're operating at the same level of abstraction. You can double-click into that to see what it is. You can tidy it up all you like, but the point is that this is now a consistent event graph hanging off begin play. So the property associated with MyTank could not be found. So if you have any problems with this node saying MyTank's not recognized, just ensure that your health bar is compiled and saved, and then remove it and re-add it. The other thing we can do is we can break the link from cast fail to the return node. We don't need to worry too much about handling that cast failing, I don't think, here. And then we have a nice, simple, tidy function in there. I'll just close and zoom in so you can see the whole thing. So we come into initialize health bar widget. We find the widget component. We get the user widget. We cast it to a health bar. And then we set that Blueprint variable, which we then pick up over in the health bar over here. So we're nearly there. What we need to do with this health bar now is we just need to position it appropriately on the tank. We have a tank. If we look at the viewport of the tank, we can zoom out and you'll see this guy here. Look at the size and shape of it. It's massive. You can move it around and we can decide where here now physically it appears. Now you'll only see it from one side, so we're going to just see it from this side. Now if we grab the details tab, this is the time before we change it from world to screen space, which I'll explain in a minute. We decide how big it's going to be. Maybe 50 pixels wide by maybe 10 pixels high. Pretty small. But there it is, and it sits above the tank. You can change the color, of course, if you wish. You can go into the health bar itself, into the designer, and you can come here and just change that color, all you like. But see what happens as the health bar progresses first. Once you've got it in the right place, you can switch it from world space to screen space. It will actually disappear. But once we play the game after saving our tank blueprint, you see it there, that little blue bar? Now let's see what happens. I'm going to hit the enemy tank. Its health bar goes down. Hopefully you can see that. I'll make the screen bigger. He hits me. My health bar goes down. And so on. Okay, so we have working health bars after all that. So I hope you managed to follow that. There's quite a lot of stuff going on there. To recap what we did for you, we started off by making ourselves a health bar component on the tank. We just called it a widget. We could now rename it health bar. But you see there's two health bars involved. This is health bar widget component, but it's of widget class health bar. That's why I left the names the same until the end here. We then made a health bar, which is literally just a progress bar, 100% of the canvas, full with a progress bar. We then decided to use the progress. Now, where is it? On the progress bar, we bound this get% method, which if you look in the graph over here, is here. And we used a Blueprint pure function on the tank called get%. The question comes, how do you find the tank? How do you find the tank that we're talking about? Well, in the tank, we, in the event graph, made this simple initialize health bar widget. And unfortunately, it needs to do a little bit of casting, but this is what we ended up with. And we went through and set that Blueprint variable here, back on the health bar, and we got the information through that we needed. So, any problems with following the code, just simply go over to GitHub as usual, Unreal course, find this lecture, or you can link from resources. I'll also put a link to this lecture in the resources, and you can look at the changes there. So, look forward to seeing you in the next video.